we've got, I'm just giving you an excerpt of some of the things some ideas that might work for interdisciplinary research. Now, they will work in other contexts as well. So when I talk about it, these are not all examples from interdisciplinary research, but I've taken quite a few that we've done that I work with people from different disciplines. And so for me, it's cross-disciplinary as well. Okay, so here's a series of images. There'll be a prompt at the bottom. Just have a scan over this screenshot or screen and pick 3 images that represent interdisciplinary working for you and pop them in the chat. So it would look like something like, I'm going to choose the coin, the euro coin, because mine is about funding and money is a big issue. I'm going to choose the sunflower because we're bringing sunshine to the world. Okay, so I'll put in an example if you're not sure how much detail to do. If you don't want to do an explanation, that's absolutely fine. By the way, this session is interactive. Who knew? So pick 3 items that you think would speak to you about interdisciplinary work. I'm going to pause while we do that. In fact, just pick the items for now, and then if somebody wants to share about it, we'll do that. Give us 30 seconds more. Okay, so the chat's working and happy. I'm going to scroll back, see who's in the room while people are going. Lovely, we've got a few, thank you. Super. Okay. Does anybody want to share? Thank you for those that have been able to sort of come on screen and just share, or just if you can't do on screen, but you can do audio, that would be quite nice. If you could maybe raise a hand or just unmute and come along, that'd be great. Neil, you're up.
Thanks, Curie. Yeah, I'm an academic across FMH and Faculty of Engineering and Physical Sciences. So my research is in the basic sciences, doing cross-faculty research with a number of people from different schools. So I chose a key because I feel like interdisciplinary research needs a lot of people to unlock challenging problems, and the pile of stones represents trying to achieve difficult challenges by lots of people putting together different pieces. And I think it's a mirror. I chose a mirror because reflection and communication between different members of the teams is very important, and we have to learn to try and understand different people's language and points of view.
Wonderful. Thank you, Neil. That's brilliant. So I'm going to move us on to the next slide. But if you had chosen the same items Neil did, you might have had a different narrative about it. So you might have said, look, I chose a key because the key's a bit trickier. I chose a mirror because it allows people to then look in a different perspective, something like that. So here we've got just sort of visual images you can choose from to start a conversation. Okay, I'm going to go to the next slide. So this session is basically, we've written the book to be interdisciplinary in itself, and that was quite tricky, and you might find this with interdisciplinary work, taking it to a publisher, because they were like, where is this sitting? And we were like, but it sits across. So there's one of those tensions. So I'm hoping these are some of the people that we work with. So I worked with Steve Hutchinson on the book. And so both of us work with different teams of people. We work as facilitators, coaches, researchers, research developers, education developers. So we're coming into contact with lots of different people. And so we hope that we have built a resource book. So in this session, we're thinking about why use a graphical approach, how to amplify it or how to make it more worthwhile for yourselves, how to make it more effective, and then tricks and tips. So interdisciplinary research is quite often a detangling or a remapping, a neatening up, but quite often it's messy or it will have messy phases. So we like graphical facilitation for dealing with challenge, messy or wicked problems. Why do we use it? Because Steve and I have done this for a long time individually. And then when we talked about it, we got to a point of going, well, where did you learn? We just made it up as we went along and it worked and we kept going. So the reason we used it was that it worked. And the other thing is it made it more interactive and it gave people voice. And that's very important to both of us. We wrote the book because we were kept sharing ideas. Look what I did this week. Look what and we shared photos. And then we were like, where did you learn from? And so we did the classic. We wrote the book that we wish we'd had. So I'm going to pause again. Do pop in the chat. How do you think you use visuals in your practice at the moment? This could be from the idea generation stage. It could be for refining research questions. It could be about team working. It could be about, different stages in the research cycle. So how do you use visuals at the moment? I'm going to pause again and let the chat run. If you'd rather not do that and just speak, because of the number of people in the room, if you could raise a hand, a digital hand, and then we will go to you. So the question is what's on screen? How do you use visuals? And if you think, well, I don't really, then put that in. I'm not sure that I do. It's absolutely fine. And if you want to add in how, so you might say, well, I use pipe cleaners, or I use lots of colors, or I have lots of colored pens. So the sort of process side of it, please do. Absolutely. Thank you for the ideas. So I'm going to speak through some of them. So some of them may not be with other people. They might be about thinking about your own work, planning, co-production. Just losing the chat. Let me go back up. Flowcharts, starting conversations. Thank you. Multicolored hats. Oh no, that was the previous one. Jigsaw pieces. Lego series play, metaphors, scribbles. Whenever pens still work. Predictions of patterns. Okay, spatial representation. So diagrams. Brilliant. And concept. Okay, so I'm going to pause there, go back to the slides and run through. So we're now trying something. We're trying a poll. And so Lauren is going to launch this. It will have this question, but I'm going to stop the slide and hope that everything works. We will have a default setting. We have another idea if it doesn't work. So at the moment, you've got this question, like how do people respond when I ask them to draw? So I'm going to stop sharing. Now the poll should come up as a screen sort of overlaying, where you're looking in at the minute, but it will also be in the chat. It's probably easier to drive it through the chat. So please pop in a word. When I ask people, yourselves, we're going to draw. How do people respond? Put as many sort of single word or maybe a short phrase into the box. So in the chat, type an answer and submit. But I'd like you to keep going with it. Okay, so I'm going to pause again for 1 minute. We can see that people are responding, so I'm hoping that's okay. If you need to come on screen or just, if it's not looking as it sounds like it should be looking, let us know. So what you should have in the chat is you have a little live poll. It's got one question. There's 22 responses. You type your response in and put submit, and just put in as many as you want. So you can put in like up to 5, say. You put in more. And then we'll show you the end product and probably do a screen capture. That's a good point. So Anthony, thank you. It's because so I'm putting it from my perspective, but put it in from yours as well. So what do you can have it in whatever way. Really, the question is, how do people respond? What's their gut response when being asked to draw? Whether it's Curie asking them, you asking them, you being asked. What are some of the responses that emerge? Okay, we've got a nice sort of flurry of responses, so we'll have a look at that now. No idea if we can expand this any bigger, so I can see I've just zoomed my screen up, so that's good. Lovely. Have a scan through. There's fun activity, normal, a range of feelings, but you'll see actually the majority is fear. It's got excitement, surprise. Now, we didn't show you these words, mainly because we didn't figure out how to do it. But here is a graphic facilitation tool that you probably have used, which is word cloud, but it is with text. So graphical facilitation means a lot of things. Here we've done another example. The big thing here is fear, surprise, being startled, uncertain. The phrasing that we've got here at the bottom right, feeling exposed, that is one of the main things. People feel exposed. So I'm going to talk you through that. There's more in the book. I'm going to go back to the slides. Thank you so much for participating. So essentially, you get this sort of thing, whether people say it or not. I can't draw, but I can't draw. So generally, people have stopped using the utility of drawing or symbol making at about aged 8 to 10. And that's usually through schooling. So what is reinforced is what grows. What is not reinforced does not grow. One of the easy wins especially if you've got children, grandchildren, and people in your lives, is just have drawing materials out. And if you draw, let them see you draw as a way of thinking. And so it's what's encoded culturally. So unfortunately, people kind of stop at sort of about age 8. People think when I ask them to draw that it's one of Steve's amazing visual maps of a conference or an event. That's how he started. He doesn't do that at the minute, but that's what you might think of as graphic facilitation, which has its place totally. But actually, it's quite a complex skill set to do that. Or it might be something more arty, like I'm doing. Like you're gonna make me do what? But that's not what we mean by graphical facilitation. It's usually using what you already have. So you'll have some paper, you'll have some pens, you may have the ubiquitous post-it or sticky notes. So I over time, I made a sort of grab bag. So this was a sort of bag of items. So sometimes I'll take in something specialized like that. It is up to you what you use. You'll see some of the things that we use here. So just to give you some background, there's 2 models in the book. This is one of them. The tools that you use, graphical facilitation, depends on what you want. So is it about this sort of intersection, about group interaction? We haven't got a huge amount here. In another group, you'd have much more. So it depends what framing you've got. And then what relationship have you got with them? Are you coming in for 1 hour? Have you got 10 weeks with people? And that changes what you might do. So this is about nurturing the discourse. What tools and processes you might use would be also about what you choose, how you tailor the content. So as you start doing it, you might think, well, word clouds would work here, but this would work better. And that's an experience base. I'll give you some easy ones to start with if this is unfamiliar to, but in the group we've got lots of go-tos as well. And the other thing is the right environment. So there was, for example, I did a collaging thing. I put in requests for rooms, and I was given a tiered massive lecture theatre. Now, if collaging is new to you, you might think this is not going to work. I'll choose something else. I chose the collage because I knew I could make it work with 100 people in a lecture theatre. So what is the right environment? There'll be some environments you think, I can't actually do this. So this is your facilitator's experience that you bring in as well. I'm going to pause, let you run your eye over how we formatted the book. Because we're tag teaming, Lauren's also watching for questions. So if you get questions bubbling up, I'll do a little question time and pauses. But if they bubble up and they'll disappear and you want to put them in the chat, please do. So that's how we've laid it out. This was, interestingly, the first book or the first piece of work that I've, is this true? We wrote the book actually from our snapshots. So we had our pictures as the items that we did in our facilitation. We started drawing from there. So we started writing from the visual. So that might be another way. Okay, so the easiest drawing to do with people, especially if they are uncomfortable with it, or easiest graphical facilitation is no drawing at all. Okay, that's one of the ins in. So I'm going to show you some examples with picture cards. You can have your own set of postcards or collage. Sometimes I'll say to people, please bring a magazine with you. Or please bring items with you. Please bring some photographs. Remember, on people's phones, we now have a whole load of photographs. You can use those as well. So here are some picture cards, and we'll lay them out and give people a prompt to collect. Okay, that's what it looks like in the space with people, and they can either grab one card, they're just talking to that one card, or you can build it into a bigger activity where people are making notes, sticking things together, a bit like dominoes, kind of seeing what clusters together. And these are really nice ways to get people moving, talking, and also being quite light-hearted in terms of, oh, I wanted that picture. So I'll say, you know, do beg, borrow, steal as well. So this can be a 5-minute activity, or it can take 45 minutes, depending what you're doing. But really graphical facilitation is in service to the conversation and the purpose of the session. I'm going to let you run your eye over this. This is a more complex one. If there is a point where you think, Curie, it's upside down, it is, but it's also the right way up, depending where you're going. So you'll see at best at the top, and then you'll see concerns at the bottom. So here you've got scales being put in place. So this was much more discursive. So somebody is mapping. That might be you as a facilitator, or getting the group to map. Okay, so in terms of context, you can see in terms of facilitation context, you can see tape. These are big pieces of paper that were on a table, so you could walk around and add notes to it. Okay, it ends up being a visual that you can also talk to or come back to. Obviously, you've got storage, you can store it, unravel it, and come back to it again. Okay, collaging, I do a lot of collaging, so I'll take materials with me. And And I've given you some examples if that's helpful. So I'll say you've got 5 minutes, collect some images, and then arrange them on the card. I do not give them the card. I will say we're going to do 5 minutes. Pick the images you're drawn to. So I particularly I emphasize that I don't want them to look for an image. So they might be like, oh, I want to talk about, time. I'm going to have to find an image. This is the other way around. This is knowledge making through the images and what you're drawn to. So I'll say something like, pick the images you're drawn to, then give them a prompt, or give them a prompt and say, go pick the images. I'll give them 5 minutes to collect a whole pile and then start laying them down in different sections. So these are good for definitions where you've got maybe a whole group of people that have a different way of seeing the word sustainability or compassionate leadership or policy about something very specific. It might be something about impact. It might be about success as a team getting together. What does success look like? What does a climate crisis, very big topics, look like? I tend to get people to talk through. This is the biggest thing. When people make things, they want to talk about them. And so building in time to talk about it is really important, or inviting 1 or 2 people. But what tends to happen is if they've got lunch or if you're still together, the conversations continue. Another way is, and this is on Padlet, where you get people to upload. So this was about refining research questions. No, this was PhD journey. So different people from different disciplines talking about what they hope for their PhD. So this was vision casting. Okay. So another way you can use graphical facilitations is unearthing some of the discomfort and the roles and the boundaries and the hierarchy and the biases and the stereotypes using images. Now there is some care that's needed here. So here we've got a project that or a part of a project that Steve did on interdisciplinary working, and you'll see he's split it into sort of a positive dynamic in the middle, so the angels and demons. So he's put together a sort of pros and cons, if you like, strengths and weaknesses. You could write it in a list or you could draw them out. And then people have added to it. So some of the tensions that come up, and that is so people can see it. You can also use this digitally on a whiteboard and people can type in it. One thing I would say is quite helpful if you can use a tool that for people to remain anonymous as well. Okay, as you can see, these are stick figures, these are speech bubbles. It is text in bubbles, but it's laid out graphically it's divided up. And then obviously you can talk through that. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to you do not have to share this. If you want to share it, you can. A piece of paper and just do a cartoon drawing. I'll do one of your role or your typical week. Use as many things as you want. If you can use a circle, you don't need to do this. All I'm saying is this is no big drawing thing. You can use a little cartoon, you can use circles, boxes, sticks, a flow chart, doesn't matter. So we're going to pause again. So do a quick cartoon drawing of your role or your typical week. You may want to hold this within your interdisciplinary working or just do it for something else. You might find it easier to think about other types of role that you have. So if you were to represent your role, what would you draw? I will do a quick sketch too. Okay, if you've just come into the room, we are hovering quietly. while you just draw your role. Just on a sketch, you do not have to share it. It's just sort of graphically representing how you see your role. I'm going to pause. I'm going to show you mine. However, I've got background, so it won't look so good. If anybody wants to take a snapshot and put theirs in the chat, then you're very welcome to. No pressure to do so. But what you have here is, and I'll connect this to the next one. I'm actually going to stop sharing for a second. I'm going to hold this piece of paper right in front of my face because I think you'll be able to see it. So I see my role. There's quite a lot about nurturing and growth. So that is, you can see it's very rough. And if you can't tell what it is, it's a tree. So sometimes I'm doing the sort of energizing, nurturing, and then there's different fruit. But the fruit isn't mine. The fruit is other people's fruit. But you've also got clocks there as well as fruit. So that's how I see how I do things. Would anybody like to share? This feels a little bit, bit trickier, but you can see that the level of drawing is not the point. Okay. If anybody would be happy to share, do press the hand, to raise your hand. And there's some popping in. Thank you, Dina. Okay, that's tricky. That's absolutely fine. So I'll show you. Oh, Mark. Thank you for being bold. That's really kind of you.
Yeah, apologies I'm late. So I've done this very quickly and spontaneously, but and mine's sort of oh, you can't, there you go.
Yes.
More like a timeline type thing of a typical atypical week where there's sort of moments of what feels like reprieve where you're waiting for other people to return things that you've previously said to them, and then suddenly everything spikes and sends you off in all directions. I'm also very much into endurance sports, so I think I've modeled that on some kind of intensity graph. But
nice. Yeah. So you've got, so that's quite nice because you've used one line and just kind of done a sort of movement of a line, if you like. Thank you. And then others have put in, I'd have to click in. Hang on, I'm going to click in. Okay, so we've got a face and then lots of different other icons as well. That's Christopher's. Thank you. And Dina's. It's got a stick figure in the middle and then bubbles. Okay, so great. I'm going to go back to sharing the PowerPoint. So what I've asked is, do represent your role. So you can do this with a group of people. It's quite a nice way to start the conversation. It is the same as doing what we had at the beginning, which was me saying, do tell us about yourselves. What we find is when you use visuals, you have there's sort of meta narratives within it, a bit like Mark's line. It had loads in it, and Mark could talk about it, I'm sure, and because then I could say, well, what about this bit and what about this bit? So what happens is you get, what we found, you get a richer narrative as well. So what you could do then is take people's move on from that. I say not take, but move on from that in the following way. So here, Steve had asked people to represent their role. And I'm not sure if you can tell entirely, but these are all A4 sheets that are now laid out on a flat surface on the table, and now with arrows and connections. So the arrows, so he prints off some arrows and cuts them out. So he carries a stash of arrows. This I don't have. I think it's a great idea, but this was a new idea for me. So we're constantly collecting ideas. So this is where he asks people to represent your role and then think about it within the context of an organization. Where would you put these groups of people? Okay, because it was not about person specific, it was role specific. Within the organizations, in terms of the value set, where are people positioned, or where are roles positioned in this organization? And then connect them with arrows. I forget the code for his arrows there, so I don't think he tells me. But what the group did is people in finance or money was put in the middle, and things came out of that within that context. So this might be an organization with finance, marketing, so different groups within an organization. So this was organization based. And then building, so layered drawings. Okay. Another way you could do it is represent, but this is now the ideal. So this is quite nice for vision casting. So draw your ideal, and then you can fit in what you want. So it might be a relationship, it might be the ideal success, it might be collaboration. Have a look at the central picture. Can you guess who this is? This was another live brief, and you can see the picture was quite big, so it was a group that drew onto this. Who is it that we have asked? What was our prompt here? This is just for novelty factor. So I'm just looking at the chat. Beth said you can use arrow post-its. Fabulous, yes. So that's quite nice. And it allows you perhaps to put it on a vertical surface. So some of those work well. So is it the perfect researcher? Is it the perfect scientist? Yeah, very close. This is the perfect supervisor. So this is us with a new group of PhD. It wasn't that new, actually. And they got very into this. So you can see somebody with many hands. That's the other thing, that you've suddenly got a template of a person and then additional things. So yeah, this was the ideal research supervisor, or could be a PI as well. So somebody in a senior role. You could ask for different figures. So you could say a person. People are more likely to draw the template of a person. I can't even remember what that was. So here are some examples. And giving people scope. Yes, you can start with a figure, but you can draw whatever you would like. So that's the ideal something or other. Okay, I'm jumping through ideas. I'm hoping to spark ideas for you, and for you to also be going, oh yeah, I do that. Here's another one that is particularly helpful for interdisciplinary working. And this is an enforced perspective, where you say we are now going to think about whatever the topic is through this lens. You can call them lenses as well. And so this was a big sheet of paper with a circle, but everybody, we moved people. We said, we are now looking at this section. So we were actually looking at a section. We then well, you can pivot the paper or pivot the people. And so you move. I tend to do this not on paper, but in an actual room. So I will zone the areas into particular areas and say, go and visit these areas, but I will time it. So I'll say, right, we're going to spend 5 minutes on whichever one you start with, whichever one you'd want to look at. Got 5 minutes there, and now you're going to move to another section. So essentially, if you're looking through different, especially disciplinary perspectives, it is important to accord value in terms of time spent on these areas, and to have them up for people to look at together, so that you go through and walk through what's happening. You might need clarification. There's no text on this because we designed just a if you like, an anonymized template, but it's just to show you different viewpoints where you'd move through. I would tend to use this space for that. If you know Edward de Bono's Thinking Hats, it's the same sort of idea. To give you an example, I used a film. This is within health, and I showed a very emotionally charged section, and different people were in the mix. And then I stopped the film and said, I moved people through different tables as a group. This was a big group. This was about 55 people. So split them into groups, and then they physically moved round tables. But they were asked to reflect on the film, but from the perspective of one of the individuals. What was happening from their perspective, write about that, and then go through. And then essentially at the end, you had a stitched narrative. Okay. So we're coming into land, just a few more ideas. Here is another non-drawing. When you give people Lego, most people feel comfortable clicking bits together. There is a familiarity, there is a lightness. One of the ideas is having lots and lots of pieces, but unfortunately it tends to go against you. And please do pop in if you use, because there were some people that have used Lego, please do pop in your reflections on that. So I interrupted myself. I used to think I need a large amount of Lego, which is expensive, but actually I found that people spent longer looking for the perfect piece, and that became the distractor. So it wasn't really that necessary. So because you're working with metaphors, you do not need that much. You can get kits that are much smaller. I tend to just put a whole pile of bricks in the middle, and then people pick and choose out of them. But I don't do as many as I don't put out as many as I would want to. So in this particular one, this was with people from different disciplines. So it was within education, it was on a PG cert. We were nearing the end of the teaching qualification PG cert. And I asked them, this was actually pre-COVID, to build the university of the future. So they each built themselves, and then they brought it together and talked about different elements. So they then started unbolting some of their Lego materials and rebolting with others. And they then put this sort of a loop around here. The big thing was that we need to be able to connect and not be physically placed. And then we had COVID. So that was quite helpful. There is a link, or you can have a look at it. There is an open source link, I think, that David Gauntlet has written about Series Play. There are lots and lots of resources, but I just put in an open source one. Okay, I'm going to pause, look at the chat. In fact, I'm going to flick through to the next one, scan your eye over that. I'm just going to have a look at the chat, so I'll pause. I'm going to go back to Inez's question. Do come online. Yes, I can talk about how I would frame the question. Which one was that to? Or which image? Super, thank you so much. That was about the perspectives. Okay, so this one, you can see we work with researchers a lot, but this is journeys for PhD research. Now, this was open-ended, so I use a lot of timelines. You could say, right, on a timeline, map out, or you could say, here is your piece of paper, map out what you expect for your timeline. And here it's much more experiential. How are you going to experience your PhD? What do you envisage? What has happened when you've talked to people? And so I tend to get people to reflect, and then I will add in a layer like, and now what? Now you've reflected on that, what does that build in? So I'm going to switch, because I don't think I've used the example. So I worked with curriculum developers and said, how have you built in resilience into your 3-year undergraduate program? But this was across different programs. And as people walked through, I used the metaphor of a stream. So I gave them, you're using the metaphor of river. So how does it start? What's it like after year 1? So they mapped out what it might look like from a student perspective, and then what they've put in to the curriculum. And that was really helpful because people started borrowing from each other. So what happened is people said, well, we always see a drop off after December, after the first term. And so what we started doing is 15-minute touch points. So conversations, and somebody else said, oh, we could do that. That's very doable. Somebody else had a little flow chart. Now you're back, where are you at? So that's building in points to help support the journey of the student. Could be any journeys. Okay, here's another non-drawing. I'm going to pause so you've got some eye to capture some of the information, and then I'll explain it. Okay, so this is where you would have different cards with different labels, and people sort them into a diamond of what is the high priority areas, what is the low priority. Really helpful in terms of, we only have 6 sessions to work together. What as a group do we think we need to focus on? Or do it individually and then bring them together. So this one was on values. This is Prosper, the career management tool, and I just took their sets of values or their words and made them into physical cards that people could sort. The values are something people think they know, but then realize, oh, I actually don't know what my values are. In this context, it was so that people can align career decisions with what is important to them. Okay. You could do it on, what's important for collaborations, what's important from our outcome measures. If you come across the GROW model, there is the GROW model is a coaching model. So it's, what is our goal? What is our endpoint? What is where we're at now, the reality? What are the outcomes we want? And what is the willpower? How are we going to do this? This one we've done the other way around. So goals are actually sometimes intangible or very broad. We might start with the R, the reality. So here's an example. You can do it with these are bottle tops, or drawing. What is happening at the minute? What's the reality? So here's a picture about a reality of what was happening in the context. What do you want? And then talking about how you might get there. So 2 drawings. So that's the GROW model, but the R and the G tipped around the other way, because sometimes it's easier to start from where you are with a group. Okay. And then last but not least, there are these, we tend to do everything by hand, or show or put, collate it digitally. But you could say, what would you like your workforce to look like? You describe it to AI and generate a picture from that. Sometimes, certainly, probably more one-to-one, we're talking about friction points with coaching. People will say, look, I feel all sorts of things that might fit with the imposter syndrome. So we'd say, right, type that in and see what comes up. That's not that one. That's that one. So we get gremlins. What does your gremlin look like? That's what it looks like. Okay, we're now going to talk and work through that image of the gremlin. The one at the bottom was good, where you're describing what the current situation is. What does it look like? Well, it feels like a roadworks and there's signs everywhere. And that's just to make not what's invisible, because you know what it is, but what it's almost unvisible. I need to put it into, I can't put it into words. We'll put it into graphics and then let the words work around that. Okay. And then the last one was space. So there's my collage making in a lecture theatre. So it is doable. If you have a big space, you can lay out paper. That was an art space, bottom right. I also do things on the beach. So that was a coaching walk with a group after a conference. And then what's a little bit more typical in terms of space, but actually use the space you have. And then you can mix and match. So you can add some lines, you can add some Lego, you can add text. You'll see here there's dotted lines, which mean different things. They're in different colors, but you're doing this as a collaboration. Okay. One of the other things is people tend to take photos and want to share it, or it makes it shareable, or they'll remember. So I did a project over 3 years, my PhD, and people would say, oh, I remember that you had a picture of a saxophone. It was 3 months ago. They've only met 5 times. Okay, so last, as we wrap up, you might want to take a minute to think about, well, how might you use it within your current context? So all I've done here is put my hand down, drawn around it, and then put your 5, they're also called 5 W's, even though one is an H. So what of these tools might you use? How might you use it? When might you use it? Who might be in the mix? Who are you going to use this with? And why? What is its purpose? We're going to come back into the room just for the last 5 minutes. What I've done is I actually use this as a thinking tool. So this was a session that I run called Effortless CPD. And so I just mapped out, what do I want to do? There's not much here, but it's just a single thing that I can position as a single item and then write to. So this was to build a presentation. Okay. Thank you so much. I love hearing how you use these things. So social media is fine. LinkedIn, I tend to do quite a lot of posts on there. I will post something today. Feel free to repost or do your own posts. That'd be lovely. Feel free to let me know what you think about the book and tell people about it as well. That would be wonderful. I'm going to stop sharing and come back into the room.